The morning of November 15th, 2025, was supposed to be Donald Trump's triumphant return to Washington, D.C., a carefully orchestrated rally designed to showcase his political resurrection and launch his 2028 presidential campaign. 10,000 supporters had gathered on the National Mall. Conservative media was providing wall-to-wall coverage, and Trump himself was riding high on recent polling that showed him leading the Republican primary by double digits. But what started as a celebration of political power would explode into the largest civil uprising in Washington since the 1960s. Because unknown to Trump and his security team, a coalition of activist groups had spent months planning the most sophisticated counter-protest operation in American history. And when Trump took the stage to address his cheering supporters, he had no idea that 200,000 protesters were converging on downtown Washington from every direction, armed with evidence of his most damaging secrets and determined to end his political career once and for all. Within 2 hours, the Secret Service will be rushing him to safety in an armored vehicle, while the streets of the nation's capital erupted in the kind of mass demonstration that changes the course of history forever. The seeds of November 15th had been planted 6 months earlier in a series of secret meetings that brought together the most powerful progressive organizations in America. The initial gathering took place in a nondescript conference room in downtown Chicago, far from the prying eyes of Washington political operatives and conservative media watchdogs. The organizers represented a who's who of American activism. Leaders from Black Lives Matter, the Women's March, March for Our Lives, climate justice organizations, immigrant rights groups, and labor unions. What made this coalition unprecedented was not just its size, but its level of coordination and strategic planning. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the former Obama administration official who had quietly become one of the most effective grassroots organizers in the country, had called the meeting after Trump announced his intention to hold a major rally in Washington. Martinez understood that traditional protests, while powerful, often lack the focused impact needed to create lasting political change. "We can't just show up with signs and expect to change anything," she told the assembled organizers. Trump's base is energized, his media machine is powerful, and traditional protests often play into his narrative about radical leftists. "We need something different." This something different that emerged from months of planning would become known as Operation Truth Storm, a coordinated effort to expose Trump's most damaging secrets while simultaneously demonstrating the scale of opposition to his political comeback. The operation had 3 distinct phases: intelligence gathering, mass mobilization, and strategic revelation. Each phase was designed to work in harmony with the others, creating a cascade of events that would overwhelm Trump's ability to control the narrative. The intelligence gathering phase had begun immediately after the Chicago meeting. Teams of researchers, journalists, and former government officials had spent months compiling evidence of Trump's misconduct that had never been fully revealed to the public. Unlike previous efforts that focused on single scandals or isolated incidents, Operation Truth Storm aimed to present a comprehensive picture of corruption that would be impossible to dismiss or deflect. The research teams had uncovered financial records showing previously unreported foreign payments to Trump businesses, communications revealing attempts to interfere with ongoing criminal investigations, and evidence of a systematic effort to use government resources for personal political benefit. Most damaging of all, they had obtained recordings of private conversations where Trump discussed plans to circumvent constitutional limitations on presidential power if he returned to office. The mass mobilization phase had been equally methodical. Rather than relying on spontaneous anger or last-minute organizing, the coalition had spent months building a network of trained activists in every major city on the East Coast. Transportation had been arranged, communication systems established, and legal observers prepared for potential confrontations with law enforcement. The scale of the planned demonstration was unprecedented. Organizers estimated that over 200,000 people would converge on Washington, representing the largest coordinated protest action since the Vietnam War era. The participants weren't just the usual suspects of progressive activism. They included suburban mothers concerned about democracy, veterans opposed to authoritarianism, and young people motivated by climate change and social justice. But the most sophisticated element of Operation True Storm was the strategic revelation phase. Rather than simply releasing damaging information about Trump, the organizers had planned a series of coordinated disclosures timed to coincide with his rally appearance. The goal was to create a media firestorm that would overshadow Trump's message while providing concrete evidence for his unfitness for office. The revelations would be delivered through multiple channels simultaneously. Major newspapers would publish investigative pieces based on leaked documents. Social media platforms will be flooded with verified evidence of misconduct, and giant screens throughout the protest area would display the most damaging recordings and communications for all to see. Trump's team, focused on their own event planning and buoyed by favorable polling numbers, had completely missed the signs of what was coming. Their intelligence gathering focused primarily on traditional security threats and potential disruptions from small groups of activists. They had no idea that they were walking into the most sophisticated political trap in modern American history. The choice of November 15th for Trump's rally had seemed strategically brilliant when it was announced. The date fell between major election cycles, allowing maximum media attention without competing with other political events. The National Mall location provided the dramatic backdrop that Trump craved, with the Capitol Dome and Washington Monument serving as symbols of the power he sought to reclaim. Trump's advance team had worked for weeks to ensure perfect optics for the event. The stage was positioned to maximize the visual impact of the crowd. Sound systems were tested to ensure Trump's voice would carry clearly across the mall, and media platforms were erected to provide optimal camera angles for television coverage. The rally itself was designed to serve multiple purposes, energizing Trump's base for the 2028 campaign, demonstrating his continued political viability to potential primary opponents, and generating the kind of massive media coverage that had always been central to his political strategy. The speakers list read like a Trump loyalist hall of fame. Governors Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem, Senators Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, along with a collection of House members, conservative media personalities, and business leaders who had remained faithful through Trump's legal troubles and electoral defeats. The messaging strategy focused on themes of American renewal, conservative values, and Trump's vision for reclaiming the country for what he characterized as radical left-wing control. The speech that Trump's team had prepared was designed to be both inspirational and confrontational, rallying his supporters while drawing sharp contrasts with Democratic leadership. Security planning for the event had been extensive, with coordination between the Secret Service, Capitol Police, and D.C. Metropolitan Police. The security perimeter included multiple checkpoints, metal detectors, and surveillance systems designed to prevent disruptions and ensure Trump's safety. What none of these security measures had accounted for was the scale and sophistication of what was approaching from every direction as Trump supporters gathered on the mall. The first signs that something extraordinary was happening came at dawn, hours before Trump's scheduled noon appearance. Social media platforms began lighting up with reports of massive convoys of buses heading toward Washington from cities up and down the East Coast. Train stations in New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore were packed with protesters carrying signs and wearing coordinated T-shirts that read, "Truth Storm 2025." Highway patrol officers in multiple states reported unprecedented traffic volumes on routes leading to the D.C. metropolitan area. Rest stops and gas stations along I-95 were overwhelmed by the sudden influx of travelers, many of whom were openly discussing their plans to confront Trump's rally. By 8 a.m., the first waves of protesters had reached the outskirts of Washington. Unlike typical protest gatherings that converged on a single location, these groups were following a carefully coordinated plan that positioned them at strategic points throughout the city. One massive group, estimated at over 50,000 people, gathered at Lincoln Memorial, close enough to the Trump rally to be visible but far enough away to avoid immediate confrontation. Another group of similar size assembled at the Washington Monument, while smaller but still substantial crowds took positions at the Jefferson Memorial, the Supreme Court, and the steps of the Capitol building. The protesters weren't carrying the usual assortment of handmade signs and banners typical of political demonstrations. Instead, they had brought sophisticated audiovisual equipment, giant LED screens, and coordinated messaging materials that suggested months of professional planning. Dr. Martinez, coordinating the overall operation from a command center established in a downtown hotel, watched real-time reports from her field coordinators with growing excitement and apprehension. The turnout was exceeding even their most optimistic projections, but such massive crowds also created risks that could spiral beyond anyone's control. Phase 1 is complete, she reported to the coalition leadership via encrypted communication. We have eyes on the target location, all groups are in position, and media assets are ready for deployment. Initiating Phase 2 on your signal. Phase 2, the mass mobilization, began at 9 a.m. with a synchronized action that caught Trump's security team completely off guard. Protesters who had been positioned at various points around the city began moving toward the National Mall in coordinated waves. Their movement timed to converge just as Trump supporters were settling in for the main event. The visual impact was immediate and overwhelming. From the vantage point of Trump stage, would have been a clear view of the Capitol Dome and surrounding monuments suddenly became obscured by a sea of protesters carrying signs, banners, and sophisticated audio equipment that began broadcasting counter-programming to Trump's message. Secret Service agents monitoring the situation from rooftops and command posts quickly realized that their standard crowd control measures were inadequate for what they were facing. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst of anger that could be contained with barriers and crowd management techniques. It was a carefully orchestrated operation that seemed to anticipate and counter every security protocol. The protesters had brought their own security coordinators, many of them former law enforcement and military personnel who understood crowd dynamics and de-escalation techniques. Rather than confronting police or attempting to breach security barriers, they positioned themselves just outside the restricted zones and began setting up what appeared to be a parallel event. Giant screens that had been transported to the site in unmarked trucks began displaying a countdown timer. Truth Storm begins in 2 hours, 47 minutes, 33 seconds. The message was visible not only to the protesters, but to Trump supporters and media covering the rally. By 10 a.m., the situation had become unprecedented in modern American political history. What had been planned as Trump's triumphant return to Washington was now sharing the spotlight with the largest coordinated protest action since the civil rights era. News helicopters circling overhead captured stunning aerial footage that told the story in visual terms. Trump's 10,000 supporters gathered in their designated area on the Mall, surrounded by over 200,000 protesters who had positioned themselves at every major landmark and intersection in downtown Washington. The contrast was stark and symbolic. Trump's crowd, while enthusiastic, appeared dwarfed by the massive demonstration surrounding them. The optics that his team had worked so carefully to orchestrate were being overwhelmed by a counter-narrative that positioned his movement as a small island in a sea of opposition. Dr. Martinez monitored the situation from her command center, coordinating with field teams through encrypted communications and watching real-time news coverage on multiple screens. The initial phase of Operation True Storm was exceeding all expectations, but the most challenging moments were yet to come. All teams, this is control, she broadcast to her coordinators. Maintain defensive positions and continue peaceful demonstration protocols. Phase 3 initiates in 90 minutes. Stay focused, stay peaceful, and stay ready for anything. Trump himself was monitoring the developing situation from a secure location near the mall, watching news coverage with growing alarm and anger. His carefully planned return to Washington was being overshadowed by what appeared to be the largest demonstration against him in his political career. "What the hell is happening out there?" he demanded from his security team. "Where did all these people come from? I thought we had intelligence on potential protests." Secret Service agent Michael Rodriguez, who had been coordinating security for the event, provided a grim assessment. "Sir, we've never seen anything like this. The coordination level suggests months of planning, and the crowd size is beyond anything we prepared for. We may need to consider modifying your appearance schedule." Trump's response was immediate and predictable. "I'm not backing down from a bunch of radical protesters. This is exactly why America needs strong leadership. We're going ahead as planned. But even as Trump insisted on proceeding with his rally, his advisors were beginning to realize that they had walked into a trap more sophisticated than anything they had encountered before. The protesters weren't just demonstrating. They were preparing to release information that could destroy Trump's political future. At 11 a.m., exactly 1 hour before Trump's scheduled appearance, Phase 3 of Operation Truestorm began with a coordinated media blitz that sent shockwaves through the political world. The Washington Post published a front-page investigation titled The Trump Papers. Exclusive documents reveal pattern of constitutional violations. The story, based on previously unreported internal communications from Trump's inner circle, detailed specific plans to circumvent congressional oversight and judicial review if he returned to the presidency. Simultaneously, the New York Times released recordings of private conversations where Trump discussed using the military to suppress political opposition and eliminate what he called deep state resistance to his agenda. The recordings, authenticated by multiple independent experts, captured Trump speaking with shocking candor about his intentions to rule as an authoritarian if given another chance. CNN and MSNBC interrupted their regular programming to broadcast these revelations, while social media platforms were flooded with verified documents showing financial transactions between Trump businesses and foreign entities that raised serious questions about national security and potential treason. But the most dramatic element of Phase 3 was happening live on the giant screens that protesters had positioned throughout downtown Washington. As Trump supporters watched in growing alarm, the screens began displaying a carefully curated selection of Trump's most damaging private communications, including text messages to foreign business partners discussing plans to circumvent U.S. sanctions in exchange for personal financial gain. Recorded phone calls where Trump discussed strategies for preventing criminal investigations from proceeding, including attempts to influence judges and prosecutors. Internal campaign documents outlining plans to suppress voting in Democratic strongholds during future elections. Financial records showing unreported income from foreign sources that potentially violated federal election laws and tax regulations. Most devastating of all, video recordings from private meetings where Trump discussed his intention to declare martial law if he lost the 2028 election, along with detailed plans for using emergency powers to remain in office indefinitely. The impact was immediate and catastrophic for Trump's political future. The evidence being displayed wasn't based on speculation or anonymous sources. It consisted of Trump's own words, his own communications, and his own financial records, all authenticated and verified by independent experts. Trump supporters, many of whom had traveled hundreds of miles to hear their leader speak, found themselves confronted with incontrovertible evidence that the man they had supported was planning to fundamentally destroy American democracy. The cognitive dissonance was visible in the crowd as people struggled to reconcile their loyalty with the evidence being presented before their eyes. Conservative media personalities who were covering the rally found themselves in an impossible position. They couldn't deny the authenticity of the evidence being displayed, but acknowledging its significance would mean admitting that they had been promoting a would-be dictator. Fox News, caught completely off guard by the revelations, struggled to maintain their narrative of Trump as a defender of American values, while their competitors were broadcasting audio of him planning to suspend the Constitution. By 11:30 a.m., 30 minutes before Trump's scheduled appearance, the situation had deteriorated beyond any possibility of recovery. What had been planned as a celebration of Trump's political resurrection had become a public execution of his remaining credibility. Secret Service communications, intercepted and leaked by whistleblowers within the administration, revealed the growing panic among Trump's security team. Control, this is Overwatch. Subject is demanding to proceed with scheduled appearance despite deteriorating situation. Overwatch, be advised that crowd dynamics are becoming unpredictable. We have reports of Trump supporters leaving the venue after reviewing material on protester screens. Control, we're seeing signs of potential confrontation between subject supporters and peaceful demonstrators. Recommend immediate evacuation to secure location. Dr. Martinez, monitoring these developments from her command center, realized that Operation Truth Storm had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. The goal had been to expose Trump's true nature and demonstrate the scale of opposition to his authoritarian ambitions. They had accomplished both objectives more completely than they had dared to hope. But she also recognized that the situation was approaching a tipping point that could lead to violence if not carefully managed. The massive crowds, the explosive revelations, and Trump's predictable refusal to acknowledge defeat created a potentially dangerous combination. All field coordinators, this is control, she broadcast her teams. Maintain peaceful posture at all costs. Do not engage with counter-protesters. Our mission is truth and democracy, not confrontation. Keep your people safe and keep them focused on our message. At 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes before his scheduled appearance, Trump finally arrived at the staging area behind the platform on the National Mall. The scene that greeted him was unlike anything in his political career, a combination of triumph and disaster that defied easy categorization. His own supporters were still present in significant numbers, though many had left after being confronted with the evidence displayed on the protest screens. Those who remained were visibly shaken, with many engaged in heated discussions about the authenticity and implications of what they had seen. The surrounding area was packed with protesters whose disciplined demonstration had created a powerful visual narrative about the scale of opposition to Trump's political ambitions. Their message was clear without being confrontational. Donald Trump's attempt to return to power was being rejected by hundreds of thousands of Americans who understood the threat he represented to democracy. Trump's advisors made one final attempt to convince him to cancel or postpone his appearance. Campaign manager Susan Thompson argued that proceeding under these circumstances would only amplify the damage from the leaked materials and create footage that would be used against him for years to come. "Sir," she pleaded, "we need to regroup and respond to these allegations in a controlled environment. Going out there now will make everything worse." Trump's response was characteristic, a combination of denial, rage, and determination to fight back regardless of the consequences. "I'm not running away from fake news and radical protesters," he declared. "The American people need to hear the truth, and I'm going to give it to them. Everything they're showing is taken out of context or completely fabricated. We're going out there and setting the record straight." At exactly noon, Donald Trump emerged from behind the staging area and walked toward the podium positioned at the center of the National Mall. The moment he became visible to the crowd, the carefully controlled atmosphere of the morning exploded into chaos. Trump's supporters, energized by finally seeing their leader, erupted in cheers and chants of USA, USA, and for more years. The sound was deafening, a wall of noise that temporarily drowned out the ambient murmur of the surrounding protesters. But the protesters were ready with their own response. As Trump approached the microphone, the giant screens positioned throughout the demonstration area began playing audio from the leaked recordings, their volume carefully calibrated to be audible without being overwhelming. The result was a surreal cacophony that perfectly captured the divided nature of American politics in 2025. Trump's voice, promising to make America great again, competed with recordings of his own voice discussing plans to undermine the very democracy he claimed to represent. Trump began his speech with his standard opening, attempting to project strength and confidence despite the unprecedented circumstances surrounding him. "My fellow Americans," he declared, his voice carrying across the mall through the elaborate sound system his team had installed. "We are here today to reclaim our country from the radical forces that seek to destroy everything we hold dear." The response from his supporters was enthusiastic, but Trump could see the protest screens in his peripheral vision and hear the audio from his own leaked recordings being broadcast to hundreds of thousands of people. The cognitive dissonance was making it difficult for him to maintain his usual performative confidence. "The fake news media and their allies in the deep state have spent years trying to destroy me with lies and fabricated stories," he continued, directly addressing the revelations that were being displayed around him. "But the American people are too smart to fall for their propaganda. It was at this moment that Dr. Martinez, coordinating from her command center, made the decision that would define the rest of the day. Rather than simply allowing the leaked materials to speak for themselves, she activated the final phase of Operation Truth Storm, a live, real-time fact-checking operation that would challenge every false statement Trump made during his speech. All teams, initiate Phase 4, she broadcast to her coordinators. Live response protocol is now active. Giant screens throughout the protest area switched from displaying static documents to showing real-time analysis of Trump statements, with professional fact-checkers providing immediate corrections and context for every claim he made. When Trump declared that he had never violated the Constitution or betrayed the American people, the screens immediately displayed text messages where he discussed circumventing constitutional limits on presidential power. When he claimed that the leaked recordings were completely fake, the screen showed authentication reports from independent audio experts confirming their authenticity. When he insisted that his business dealings were totally legitimate and transparent, the screens displayed financial records showing previously unreported foreign payments and potential tax evasion. The effect was devastating. Trump found himself engaged in a real-time debate with his own documented words and actions, his claims being immediately contradicted by evidence that was being displayed to hundreds of thousands of people. More importantly, the live fact-checking was being broadcast on every major news network and streamed online to millions of viewers worldwide. Trump's attempt to control the narrative was being systematically demolished in real time by his own documented misconduct. The breaking point came when Trump, growing increasingly agitated by the counter-programming surrounding him, abandoned his prepared remarks and began directly attacking the protesters and the leaked materials. These radical leftists think they can silence the voice of the American people with their lies and propaganda, he shouted, his voice rising to levels that strained the sound system. But we will not be intimidated. We will not be silenced. We will take back our country by any means necessary. The phrase "by any means necessary" was immediately seized upon by the protest organizers, who displayed it in large text on their screens along with audio recordings where Trump had discussed using violence against his political opponents. Secret Service agent Rodriguez, monitoring the situation from his position near the stage, realized that the combination of Trump's inflammatory rhetoric and a massive crowd could quickly spiral into violence that would be impossible to control. This is Rodriguez, he reported through his radio. Subject is escalating rhetoric in response to counter-programming. Crowd dynamics are becoming unstable. We need to consider immediate extraction. The decision came from the highest levels of the Secret Service hierarchy. Trump needed to be removed from the situation before his rhetoric provoked a confrontation that could result in casualties. At 12:23 p.m., 23 minutes into Trump's speech, Secret Service agents suddenly appeared on stage and began moving toward the podium. Their body language was unmistakably urgent, and their coordination suggested a predetermined extraction plan. "Sir," Agent Rodriguez said directly into Trump's ear, "we need to move now. The situation is becoming unsafe." Trump initially resisted, unwilling to abandon his speech in the face of what he saw as leftist intimidation. But the Secret Service wasn't making a request. They were implementing an emergency security protocol that didn't require Trump's consent. Within seconds, Trump found himself surrounded by agents who began moving him toward the rear of the stage. The movement was smooth and professional, but it was also clearly visible to the thousands of people watching from the mall and the millions more viewing on television. The optics were catastrophic for Trump's image as a strong leader. The man who had promised to fight for America was being rushed away from a peaceful demonstration by his own security team, creating footage that would define his political obituary. As Trump was being escorted from the stage, the protest screens displayed a simple message that summarized the entire day. Democracy defended. Truth revealed. America protected. The removal of Trump from the National Mall marked the effective end of his political career, but it was also the beginning of a new chapter in American democracy. The success of Operation Truth Storm had demonstrated that coordinated citizen action, combined with factual evidence and strategic communication, could still hold powerful figures accountable for their actions. Dr. Martinez, watching from her command center as Trump's motorcade disappeared into the distance, felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The coalition she had helped organize had accomplished something unprecedented in modern American politics. They had prevented an authoritarian from reclaiming power through the peaceful but determined use of truth and democratic mobilization. The aftermath of November 15th would be felt for years to come. The leaked materials released during Operation True Storm led to multiple federal investigations, criminal charges, and civil lawsuits that would keep Trump in legal jeopardy for the rest of his life. More importantly, the successful demonstration of coordinated citizen resistance inspired similar movements around the world, proving that democracy could still defend itself when its defenders were willing to organize, prepare, and act with courage and determination. The National Mall, which had witnessed so many pivotal moments in American history, had added another chapter to its legacy. It had been the site where American democracy proved that it could still distinguish between truth and lies, between legitimate political leadership and authoritarian ambition. Trump's rushed departure from Washington on November 15, 2025, marked not just the end of his political career, but the beginning of a new understanding of how citizens could protect their democracy from those who would destroy it. The protests had erupted exactly as planned. The truth had been revealed exactly as intended, and democracy had been defended exactly as the founders had envisioned. The mass demonstration that forced Trump's evacuation became known as the day when America chose truth over power, democracy over authoritarianism, and collective action over individual ambition. It was a reminder that in a democracy, the people always have the final word, as long as they're willing to speak it loudly enough and clearly enough for everyone to hear. November 15, 2025, would be remembered as the day when the American people said no to authoritarianism so loudly and so clearly that even Donald Trump finally heard them. And in the echoes of that collective voice, a new chapter of American democracy began.